Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. To begin, allow me to introduce KBS Certification Services Limited, a globally accredited assurance provider and the first Indian company to be appointed as DOE by UNFCCC. For over 2 decades, KBS has been at the forefront of climate action, validating and verifying more than 2,500 climate projects across 60 plus countries, consistently earning top ranking in global performance assessment by the UNFCCC. Our expertise covers a broad spectrum of services including climate change and sustainability services, sustainability assurance, our ESG BRSR assurance, decarbonization and carbon neutrality assurance, CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism support, LCA, life cycle assessment, disclosures and climate risk services, environmental product declaration, EPD assurance, sustainable procurement and supply chain due diligence, ESG reporting and assurance, trainings, energy audits, third-party inspections and validations, product and process certification, and management certificates. The industries we serve are oil and gas, FMCG and manufacturing, financial services and banking, textiles and export units, steel and heavy industries, etc. Our global reach and impact is 25,000 climate projects verified, 150 plus million tons of COE verified, 60 plus countries served, 7,000 clients globally served. And some of our accreditations are CQI, IRCA, Accountability, Proclima, Adani. Some of our esteemed clients are Indian Oil, CO2 Balance, Delhi Metro, South Pole, Adani, etc. And now to begin today's session, I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Mr. Dushyant. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Jaspreet. So that was quite an introduction of KBS Certification Services Limited. We are known for our validation verification services, auditing, third-party assessments, training need assessments, and various other services, a brief introduction of which is already given by Ms. Jaspreet. So today I'm expecting like I have an audience that may cover from the students, teachers, professors, industry professionals, top management, and few from the same line, auditing agencies, environmental consultants. The topic that I'm going to cover today is a buzzword we can say in the field of sustainability, that is carbon neutral. So we are going to just have a basic understanding why this word is becoming a buzzword in the market of sustainability, who need to get carbon neutral, how it is declared, who gets assured, what is the benefit of becoming a carbon neutral, and how it can be a business advantage. Why? Because everything comes with the cost of money input. So why the industries need to put their money and make some effort to declare themselves and to work in the directions of being carbon neutral, declaring, getting them assured, getting them certified, and making it in a public domain, public disclosure that the company and the organization or a product or an event is a carbon neutral event. So as the title of the webinar, we have decided that is the carbon neutrality as a business advantage in line with ISO 14068 2023 version that says the climate change management and the transition to the net zero. So briefly starting with this, what is carbon neutrality? So I have tried to put this term in the sustainability term in a very common language that can be fit into everybody's day-to-day life. So carbon neutrality means that you bring your emissions down to zero. So whether it's an industry or it's a product or it's an event that because of which the emissions are there in the atmosphere. So when you put your emissions down to zero, this refers to that you are heading towards a carbon neutrality, carbon neutral status. So many organizations are not able to reduce their emissions to zero immediately, as it will take a number of years for them to make a technological investments and change the habits that climate neutrality requires. So many of the industries, they are process restricted. They are not having any window or any range or any option to switch on to another immediate switch on, I must say, to the fuel, to the different technology, to the different production process that is low carbon intensive in nature. But these organizations also wish to run in the same race and achieve a carbon neutral status, achieve the targeted net zero status, or to display themselves in us as a sustainable organization in the public domain. So how these organizations can work? So for them, there is an option that they will, when once you try to put some mitigation measures to reduce your GHG emissions, then definitely you need to take some technological investments, change your day-to-day habits, your production procedures, your raw material utilization, your supply chain management, everything. You need to work on each and every dimension. So that takes a quite a time. So what option we have? We have an option that in addition to the emission reductions measure and removal enhancement measures in the organization can invest in emission reduction outside their organization. So how this happens? This is happens in the form of offsetting. That word we use is offsetting, and that comes in the form of the carbon credits. Very often we hear this word carbon credits, carbon trading, carbon markets. So what it is? It is just the organization. It is a, you can say, a carbon reduction project, carbon removal project that has been implemented, established by an organization who is not causing any emission, but they are doing is as a good work to the humanity. So they install a project somewhere else in the world, and the company who is making some emission, who is not able to put their emission down to zero, still they are having some residual of emissions. They can purchase the emission reduction credits from that project and declare themselves as carbon neutral. This is the kind of an option that those companies which cannot immediately shift to the net zero can take as a midway. So although these offsets are not a long-term solution and they do not replace the need of you or your organization to go to zero as fast as possible, but they definitely provide an acceleration to your journey towards net zero. So as per ISO 14068, this is an, since it's an ISO standard document. So what the definition of carbon neutral is mentioned there, it's a condition in which during a specific period of time, the carbon footprint has been reduced as a result of GHG reduction or GHG removal enhancement. And if still there is some carbon footprint left that is greater than zero, then it is can be counterbalanced by an offsetting projects. So the ISO 14068 in line for you to declare and to achieve the carbon neutral status gives you two options. First, you need to reduce, then you need to remove, enhance your removals, and then you, whatever the residual or hard to abate emissions, then you can go for the carbon offsets for this. So you can purchase the carbon credits and declare yourself carbon neutral. A very recent example from India, a a baby girl child, now 3 years old, Adavi, what her parents did before she was even born, they planted 6,000 fruit trees. So, what these trees will do? These trees will grow in life along with Adavi. So, whatever emissions will be there with the life of Adavi, that is associated with the day-to-day activities of Adavi, whether it can be switching on of the fan that runs in the home of Adavi, or it's the transportation that she goes to the school, she goes to the park, whatever activities that is associated with the Adavi's day-to-day life, all those emissions they have declared that they will be removed. How the emissions will be done? Emissions will not be eliminated or stopped. The emissions will be there, but the trees which will grow along with the Adavi, they will sequester, they will remove the same amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So this is how this girl Adavi becomes the world's first carbon neutral baby. So to make it more simple for all of you, I have just mentioned it in a few steps. You start your journey by measuring or estimating your present emissions. Suppose they are 10 metric tons today. So your next step is to start reducing those emissions. There are n number of ways to reduce your emissions associated. Switch on to the green electricity. Stop driving to work. Instead, take a walk or a cycle. Get rid of your dryer. Switch to LED bulbs in home. Turn off the tap when brushing your teeth. Although these looks very simple and casual steps, but definitely they when once you accumulate them or consolidate them on a whole world level, definitely they will be a much making more impact. Even the turn off the tap when brushing your teeth, this option is quite, you can correlate with your day-to-day activity and associate yourself in a step towards reducing the climate change in nature. So after implementing all these reduction activities, implementing these measures, I assume that your emissions will reduce to 6 metric tons. Still, there are 6 metric tons out of 10 left with you, and those 6 are which you cannot eliminate, which you cannot reduce. Those are known as hard to abate or the residual ones. So how you work on these emissions? You will purchase the equivalent amount of carbon credits from the different projects running around the world that are installed and established for the same reason. So you will purchase the 6 metric tons of carbon credits and declare yourself carbon neutral over the period of time where you have estimated your total emissions of 10 metric tons. So this is how carbon neutrality journey works. So in a single frame, how you can explain what is carbon neutrality? So on one place, you will be doing the emissions. It is either from the industry or from the transportation associated with your activities. On the other hand, you will reduce some of them by switching on to the green electricity, the renewable energy, planting more number of trees, or buying the carbon credits. So how this term is different from the net zero? In simple words, I would say the ultimate result of carbon neutral or carbon management plan will be the achievement of the target net zero. How it happens? It happens in a simple form. In the first year, out of 10, you reduced 4 metric tons and 6 were offset. In the next year, you will make this reduction to 5. Then in the next year, you will make this increase this reduction to 6. This is how you will keep on increasing the reduced part of your emissions, and you will reduce the offset part. At some point of time, when you, after checking your economic feasibility and the technical feasibility of the solutions that you need to implement in your organization or on the events or on the products, you will ultimately achieve one day that the total emissions will be reduced and there will be no requirement of the offset projects. At that point of time, you will be declaring yourself to achieve a net zero status. So in a simple slide, I have tried to explain what is the net zero, part to net zero. Say in the year 2020, this was the total emission, 33.9 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. In 2030, after putting all the reduction measures, the organization has estimated that they will reach to the level of 21.1 gigatons. So this new value will be reached after making n number of reduction initiatives, increasing the removal efficiency, increasing the removal effects. Then you will reach the value of 21.1 gigatons in 2030. However, the organizations will not stand with this. They have made an ultimate aim of reaching net zero by 2050. So they will keep on working on their reduction initiatives. They will invest more on the process, on the technology, which will reduce their total emissions. Simultaneously, they will work on the carbon removal projects. They will plant more number of trees. They might go for the carbon sequestration and carbon capture technologies, CDR technologies, and other technical initiatives that can capture or remove the already done CO2 emissions from the atmosphere. And this will combined efforts of reduction and removals in the 2050 will give them the status of net zero. So you can see in the third figure, by plantation, the total emission they have reached to the net zero in 2050. What are the technical technology available for reductions? A simple grid electricity, you switch on to the renewable electricity, wind based, hydro based, solar power based. You can switch. Your organization is based in a industrial area, you have a rooftop, you plan and install the solar panels there, get energy from the solar panels, eliminate the usage of grid electricity, definitely your emissions will reduce. You can shift from AC units to the centralized steam based district cooling system. A simple measure at household level is shifting on from to the LED lights, smart lights, and moving on to other energy efficiency measures. Again, to an individual level, you can shift from fossil fuel consumption in the vehicle to the electric or green hydrogen vehicles. Even at the industry level, I must say now every industry, every organization have understood that working only on the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions will not help until and unless they work on the supply chain management also, that is the scope 3 emissions, which becomes the major part in each and every organization, I must say. So at these 4 points may be covered under the household level or on the organization level also. But in the industry level, if we see, then your power generation, what power you are using, you can partially use the power that is generated from the waste heat recovery plants. You can install alternative fuel and raw material technology in cement sectors. You can shift from road transport to the rail transport. You can shift from coal to the fuel and the clean gas. You can shift and you can optimize the supply chain management. Few of the examples I have displayed now and use them as a reference. So this is solar energy, hydro energy. This is switch in the transport from fossil fuel. You can go to EV, green hydrogen. What are the options available for the removals? You can plant n number of trees. You can, although I must say it is technology intensive and it is expensive at today's point of time, you can even opt for carbon capture and storage. Other offset projects. What are the other offset projects do we have? Other offset projects we have, or you can say the projects through which you can get the carbon credits, that are energy demand projects, cook stove projects, safe water projects, LED distribution projects. So all these projects are being taken or carried out, conducted in the countries where these are not under the regulatory norms. Other offset projects are waste to energy projects, bio CNG, power generation through the biomass, methane capture from the waste treatment and landfills. Other offset projects may be forestry and the agriculture projects. What are the benefits? So, out of all this knowledge that we have gained, that these are the initiatives, this we can do, these projects we can purchase the carbon credits, everything is cost intensive. Why the organization or an individual could take a pain to do such kind of exercise or invest a single penny in towards the journey of carbon neutrality? So I have just list down some of the important points or the benefits, I must say, that a person can have by investing his time, money, and efforts in achieving the carbon neutral status. So, carbon neutral status, this is not specifically, we have the understanding that this goes only for the organization. No, it is not for the organization, it can be for the event, it can be even for the product also. So, first is the target setting. When we go and work in the carbon neutral, or may I may say carbon management plan for the achieving the carbon neutral status, then the businesses get a realistic sustainable goals. They get a target for which they can have a structured approach and to minimize the environmental impact by building strategic roadmap and market data driven decisions. Next is the risk management. Working on the journey towards carbon neutrality definitely helps you in identify the risk associated with the climate change emissions, which are material and likely they can impact your investment decisions also. Reduce GHG emissions. When you will plan a strategy to head towards the carbon neutral status, it will help you in identifying the areas for where the emission reduction can be done or where the emission removals can be enhanced, or it will also unlock the reduction opportunity and the innovation opportunities in an organization level. Next is the resource efficiency and the cost saving. This is a very important point because whenever you will try to implement some emission reduction opportunity, I am damn sure that they will help you in optimizing the energy use and reduce. Simple example is, if you optimize the energy use in your company, it is on one hand, it is reducing your energy consumption, that is reducing the emissions related to the energy. Other side, you are getting the reduced electricity bills. So you can say definitely that the resource efficiency and the cost saving is the major point, is that is you will get as a benefit, or you can say as a byproduct on your journey towards carbon neutrality. Next is facilitating the performance monitoring and the progress tracking. Although you are you are working, you have implemented n number of mitigation measures in your organization, yet the trends are reported and the better information on the results of all the mitigation efforts that you have implemented can be better tracked, and the performance of the same can be seen if you have a structured approach and a management plan and a target to for which you can work and act accordingly. So next is the improving reputation and gaining the competitive market advantage. So each and every organization, and I must say a member of the top management of all the organization, they've always worked towards developing their product or setting out their organization on a competitive edge in the market. Why customers should select them? Why the supplier or the upstream or the downstream vendor should be selecting them on or should have their brand on preference? So in today's world, where investors, suppliers, vendors, employees, consumers, governing bodies, and all public interest organizations, they all prefer a company to associate with who is proactively working on sustainability, who are making such claims, who are declaring in public that they have reduced their carbon emissions, who are declaring, yes, we have worked on some reductions, removal enhancements, or attaining a carbon neutral status, or they are heading towards a net zero status. Working on the journey towards the carbon neutral, they will also make your company future proof for the upcoming compliances. If I talk about the compliances, we have recently received a notification from Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change that have brought identified the major sectors in India which are mainly responsible for the emissions or the GHG emissions in the atmosphere. So what MOEF has done, they have identified these sectors and they have given a target to them. So how you move towards that target? How all those companies which are not under that cap might fall in the next year or in the next year. So these are the upcoming compliances like CBAM, that's in compliance for all the suppliers who are exporting their product to Europe. So all those who are exporting their product to Europe, it's a mandatory compliance they need to fill and submit, or they should be ready for the penalty from the January 2026 under the CBAM, that is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism established by the European Union. So whenever any product of yours is heading towards Europe, so either be ready for the penalty or bring your system on board or your system to make it less GHG intensive in nature. If you are a part of a management, top management, or you are an industry profession in an environment management team, in the health safety environment management team, where your responsibility falls to make the to report the GHG data, to submit these compliances, then you have to ensure that you have a target, you have a carbon management plan, you have a set steps according to which you will work and had and meet the compliances as set now and then by the regulatory norms. So what is the role? How this ISO 14068 can help you in declaring and then achieving the carbon neutral status? So let's just explore ISO 14068 2023 version to help you to explore and achieve, to declare and achieve the carbon neutral status. So like any other ISO document, the ISO 14068 is a continuous series of ISO 14006 that the series deals with the GHG emissions and removals, the intensity. So the name is itself of the ISO standard is climate change management and transition to the net zero. So as I have mentioned that attaining the carbon neutral status is the first step you move towards your journey of net zero. So the standard clearly first says that it's a document that specifies principle requirements and is a guidance for achieving and demonstrating the carbon neutrality through quantification, reduction, and offsetting of the carbon footprint. When I'm saying carbon footprint, it is not restricting to only and only carbon dioxide. It is covering all the GHGs, the greenhouse gas, all the six which are being identified under the Kyoto Protocol. The ISO 14068 gives a flexible range of subjects that can be identified and that can be covered to be declared under the carbon neutral, whether it can be an organization like companies, local authorities, or the financial institutions, or it can be the product that can be a goods or a service, including buildings or events. If if suppose there is a company who is well known in the market. Company A is an iron and steel company. Company B is also an iron and steel company. Both have a good supply chain, a good list of downstream vendors, a good list of customers. But the company A is making a good initiative towards its sustainability journey. In the year 2020, 2030, they have given a target to achieve a carbon neutral status, and by the year 2050, they have kept the target of being net zero. While on the other hand, the company B is not working towards the sustainability. Definitely the company B will be on the left behind edge after a period of time, because the customers, the upstream vendors or the downstream vendors of these iron and steel industries, they will they will not be selecting company B as their vendor. They will be preferring company A over company B, because each and every company GHG intensity is now being a feed to the data of the upstream or the downstream vendor. So let's move on to the guidance of ISO 14068. How as per ISO 14068 we can start our journey, what are the steps we need to follow, because declaring and achieving the carbon neutral status is not a one day game. The ISO 14068 sets a clear procedure or the steps to achieve the carbon neutral status. It says first they need a commitment, a commitment that should come from the top management, a commitment that the company or the organization or an event will be carbon neutral in this specific period of time. Suppose a company A declares today they are having a GHG emissions of 100 in the year 2025, but they can make a commitment. The top management today sitting having a board meeting, they can make a commitment that by 2027 we will go carbon neutral. And in that commitment, there will be a set strategy how they will reach it, who will be the team who will work, and the commitment provides a framework for setting carbon neutrality pathway. It is commitment is also appropriate to the purpose and the context of the entity. The commitment shall identify the scope and boundary of the subject to be addressed. Commitment establish a carbon neutrality management team. Commitment ensures that the carbon neutrality management plan is integrated into the entity's level at all the stages. Commitment ensures that the strategic direction of the entity is compatible with its carbon neutrality management plan. Commitment shall have that the resources need to implement the carbon management plan should be available, and the commitment should be communicated at all the levels in the company, and it must be ensured that all the steps which will be taken in a journey to reach the carbon neutral status are not having any negative effect on the environment or on the society. So that's the first statement, carbon neutral commitment coming from the top management of the company. So in today, sitting in the board meeting, the top management will decide, yes, we need to go for a carbon neutrality in this year. And this is the set strategy that we will follow. Next is the identification of the subject and its boundary. What is the subject and its boundary? Subject is whether the organization as a whole, they will declare that organization as a whole will go for the carbon neutral status, or if there are three services, three products. Suppose take an example of the iron and steel industry. It's a DRI running, it's in steel manufacturing and the rolling mill manufacturing. Or take an example of another service industry which are having which is which is into manufacturing of a sheet, and then the other services for the forging or the preparation of the pipes through the metal sheet. So the organization can decide that which of the services, what will be the subject and what will be the boundary of the declaration of the carbon neutrality status in its declaration, in its commitment, and it should be reflected in the commitment done by the top management. So next, after setting out the commitment, deciding the subject and its boundary, next we will have on to the quantification of the GHG emission and removals of the subject. So what are the GHG emissions that are being done by the service of the organization or in the event under the premises within the boundary of an event or within an organization, and what are the removals. There may be plantation in and steel industries which are responsible for the carbon removal of the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, so that falls under the removals from the subject. So what they will do, they will set, yes, only our DRI plant in whole of the organization, only the DRI plant will go for its carbon neutral status. Can the company declare it? Yes, the company can declare it with a proper justification. Why only the DRI plant they have taken to declare themselves as a carbon neutral? They have not considered the associated induction furnace for steel manufacturing or the rolling mill. Like if a company A is having service P, Q, and R, why only service P they have declared as a subject and taken as a boundary for declaring carbon neutral? It will come from with a proper justification that this is a more carbon intensive. Other are the subsidiaries, or other are not in a direct control, or other are low carbon intensive phenomena running, or the services running in an organization. So with the proper justification, they will go for the quantification of the GHG emissions and the removals from the subject. Next is they will develop, implement and maintains a carbon neutrality management plan. What is this carbon neutrality management plan? Carbon neutrality management plan is simple, like in the first phase of carbon neutrality management plan, the emissions because of the usage of raw material 1 will be reduced, which will contribute to 10% of the reduction. In the next year it will also taken from the process, that will result in the 30% of the reduction. Ultimately it will go 50, 60, 70. So this is the carbon neutrality management plan, that year 1 the reduction will be 70%, offset will be 30%. In the year 2, reduction will be 80%, offset will be 20%. Year 3, the reduction will be 90% and the offset will be 10%. And in the final year of declaring the carbon neutral status, or achieving the carbon neutral status, the reductions will be near about 100%, and only the residual emissions which are hard to abate and are process restricted will be taken or counterbalanced by the purchased offsets or the carbon credits. So this is the entire carbon neutrality management plan that should be coming by the company along with the carbon management plan. Next is the planning and implementation and achievement of the GHG emission reductions and the removal enhancements. So whatever plan you have prepared in the carbon neutrality management, that should be implemented and should be achieved year on year, during your services, during your production process, during your events that you plan to declare carbon neutral. Next is offsetting the carbon footprint. So initially you have decided 70% in the year one, 70% of the total emissions will be reduced and 30% will be the offset. So offsetting is the major role. How you decide for offsetting? Offsetting should be the valuable carbon credits that should be verified by a third party, that should be coming from an authentic source, that should be the information of which should be available in the public domain, should be traceable, and should have a retirement age. Since the carbon credits always have a fixed tenure of their availability on the registries, they should be reduced once when you have utilized them, they should be removed from the public domain. There should be no double counting of the carbon credits, and should the every phenomena related to the carbon credits and in their declaration of carbon neutral status should be traceable. Next is the requirements after implementing the measures, after getting the carbon credits of the residual emissions, you need to report. A report is prepared by the organization and it is submitted to the third party verification. So the ISO 14068 has a set guidelines of preparation of the carbon neutral report under its clause 12. that the report should have a mandatory description of the subject, its boundary, selection of the subjects, elements of the carbon neutrality management plan, and specifically the period over which the claim is being made. What are the emissions which were found hard to abate, on the basis of which the carbon credits for offsetting has been identified? What was the baseline? What was the baseline emissions? What was the carbon footprint of the subject and its components? GHG removal within the boundaries of the subject, and an explanation and justification of any change in the quantification methodology, impact of the uncertainties, and there are other points which need to be properly followed in the reporting to prepare carbon neutrality report, and this report will be submitted for the third party verification to make the achievement as a declared claim in the public domain. And recently, the Mumbai Metro in India has declared themselves as a carbon neutral for the operation lines 2A and line 7, which is operationals and is running for the calendar year 2024. So how they have done it? So they, in a simple process, the organization take considered all the emissions, the electricity, the fossil fuel consumption, the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. They added both the emissions, they calculated it, they tried to reduce it through the installation of the solar panels and other measures that they need, like the energy efficiency, switching on to the LED bulbs. After the maximum capacity of reduction they can do, they what they did, they purchased the carbon credits for the remaining number of carbon emissions, which counterbalance them and help them in declaring themselves as a carbon neutral status. So in summing up what the emissions are, how do we get the carbon neutral status? We can simply check, like we have to calculate the carbon footprint that covers the GHG emissions, unabated GHG emissions, residual GHG emissions. Then we calculate the removals. This will result us in the total carbon footprint. Then we get the carbon credits. These can be the reduction credits. These can be the removal credits. This, when we reduce, subtract it from the carbon footprint, gives you the net result, that is the declaration of the carbon neutral status. So with this, I hope I have been able to explain the importance of declaring the carbon neutrality, in declaring yourself as a carbon neutral, how you need to declare, what are the benefits of declaring yourself as a carbon neutral organization, your event as a carbon neutral event, your product as a carbon neutral product. There are several upcoming regulatory norms and the compliances coming in the market, coming in the nationwide, which will be definitely post, and your company need to work on that, your organizations need to work on that, and every individual being working in the sustainability domain should be aware of what and how they can reach and start their journey towards the carbon neutrality, and ultimately contribute to the nation's NDCs and the ultimate net zero claim. So once again, I will just take a few minutes of yours and reiterate myself that at KBS, we ensure and that we support you in your journey towards sustainability, and we believe that sustainability is more than a compliance. We will support you with our 2 decade of experiences in GHG accounting and being tagged as the globally recognized and top ranking VVV. We assure you to certify to get your carbon neutral status certified in a correct manner and make you a valuable organization, make your event a valuable event towards your journey of sustainability. I'll just request my participants in the webinar to take a few minutes of yours and fill the feedback form that is provided to you in a chat box. Now the stage is open for the question and answers. So please put your questions in the chat box. I'll just request everyone, if you have any questions related to this, you can put your question in the chat box. So any questions? Definitely the recording will be available. The team coordinating for the webinar will be sharing the feedback form, the recording that will be also available, I think, in the public domain where you can access it later on. One of the reduction plan is plantation. Then what is the meaning of the carbon capturing and storage? So under the remove carbon, so these are the two different methods of removals. What we say when we say removal is the already emissions which are there in the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide emission, the other GHG emissions which are there in the atmosphere. When you remove them, and the removal is only possible through the methods of plantation. The plantation under the carbon sequestration, they remove the carbon dioxide that is there in the atmosphere, or you implement the expensive technology of carbon capture and storage, where the direct air capture is done and the carbon dioxide is separated out, and that is pushed down deep down into the geological formations of the earth. The technology is quite expensive, and but it is a very, you can say, in a very good output, and is rapidly being used in the market. And because the companies which are process restricted and do not have a window to reduce the emissions, they need to install this carbon capture and storage technology. That is the only option left with them. Or they need to plant the trees which can remove the emissions which that they have done in the form of CO2 in the atmosphere. What is the easiest method to calculate the GHG emission? The easiest method to calculate the GHG emission is to get the understanding of the process for which you have to do the GHG emission. Suppose a simple activity I'll take, you start your vehicle, go to your office or your college, just Google the formula how to calculate the GHG emission of the transport. It will give you the activity into the emission factor into the global warming potential. That will give you the answer of your GHG emission. So the amount of fuel that has been used or the kilometer that you have traveled, you multiplied it with the emission factors that is available with you in for the petrol, for the diesel, for the gasoline, for the other fuels. You multiplied that with the activity data and with the GWP, you will get the GHG emissions related to it. How to shift to this sector without prior knowledge of GHG compliances? For this, you need to start, I must say, a self-study, undertake a course of ISO 14064 training, where the basic understanding of GHG accounting, what is GHG and everything is imparted. Then you can head on to the GHG compliance and other norms. Doesn't the scope 3 emissions count here? It's totally the fixing of the subject as it was there in the stage and the carbon management plan. The organization can determine, can fix, under its commitment can make that whether they will be covering scope 1, scope 2, or scope 1 and 2, or scope 3 only. So it is totally under the organization control that how they need to declare their subject and its boundary. Algae can remove CO2 from the atmosphere, then why rely only on trees? Definitely. There are n number of ways which from where the CO2 can be removed. It's not that everybody is restricted to the tree, but the plantation of the tree is the most common and the easiest way that a person can start even in a household level also. And similarly for the algae growth. Is there any guideline specifying what percentage of renewable energy should be part of the overall energy consumption in an organization? No, there is no guidelines such, and there guidelines on or standards that state how much percentage of carbon reduction is required and how much should be offset. Which standard or regulatory requirements define this? There is no as such value that you have to reduce 70% and go for the offset of 30%. It's as per your management plan, but under PAS 2060, which was valid only up to the January 31st of December 2024, there it was only allowed for the very first year for a company who is declaring the carbon neutral status that they can go 100% carbon offsets towards carbon offsets, reducing zero emissions on their own, and they can purchase the carbon offset equivalent to the emissions that they have done only for the first year. But under ISO 14068, this option is vanished. Now, from the first year, you have to reduce, you have to remove, and then the emissions which are left over, the residual emission, that for that only you can go for the offsets. Is there any certification course offered by the KBS on GHG emissions? Yes, there are certification courses offered by the KBS. You can go to the site of KBS and book your slot for that. Which standard should we use for GHG calculation, GHG protocol or ISO standard? Definitely, I will recommend ISO standard because it's a globally recognized standard. Along with the calculation and the reporting part, it comes along with the management, it comes along with the risk assessment, it comes along with the planning. It has n number of features which the GHG protocol is lacking. GHG protocol is is a previously model, so it is quite famous and it is easy to use. But ISO standard is a global recognized and comes with a complete package of management, mitigation measure, target setting, and the quality control. So definitely I prefer ISO standard for its implementation, and implementing ISO standard will definitely comply with many other regulations of yours. Which standard should be used? Thanks. Any participation certificate for this webinar? The team organizing this webinar will definitely connect with you on this. Also, is there any emission factor library for India segment? There are, you can go for IPCC, for there are n number of different sources for each and every activity where you can get the emission factors for. So I think thank you all for your participation. Thank you all for taking your time. I think the session will be quite informative for you, and you can proceed and definitely make a conscious in your organization in creating or organizing the events that can be declared as a carbon neutral, and this will make your organization a step ahead in your sustainability journey. With this, I'll just close the session. Thank you all for participation.